The Legend of Zelda: A Broken Link, authored by Jim Lee, narrated by 11 Labs. Legal disclaimer. The Legend of Zelda. A Broken Link is a work of fan fiction inspired by the Legend of Zelda series, which is owned by Nintendo Co. Latinam. All characters, locations, and references to the original universe are the property of Nintendo. This work is not affiliated with, endorsed by, or licensed by Nintendo. This is a transformative, non-commercial story created for the enjoyment of fellow fans. No copyright infringement is intended. All original characters, interpretations, and storylines are the intellectual property of the author. Chapter 1. The Day the Wind Died. Before the gods fell silent, before the Triforce fractured, before fire turned legend to ash, there was a valley. Norwyn was its name, though you'd find it on no map. The world called it a village. Its people called it home. It lay tucked between soft, pine-laced ridges and deep rivers veined like glass. The wind moved through it easily, like breath. Days were marked by goat bells and apple presses, by creek fishing and the amber color of baked earth. And among its quiet people lived a boy named Link. He was not a hero, not yet. He was quiet, courteous, useful with his hands, unbothered by solitude. He helped the cooper split logs and repaired the weaver's loom without asking. When he wasn't needed, he walked the edges of the forest, where ruins lay moss-choked and mostly forgotten. He had no parents. They had died when he was young, caught in the overflow of a collapsed ferry bridge 3 winters past. He remembered the river more than he remembered their faces. The townsfolk raised him the best they could. They fed him, spoke kindly. But even as he grew strong, there remained a space around him, like a moat. No one quite stepped across it, and he didn't offer bridges. Perhaps it was the mark, a strange shape on the back of his left hand, faint, golden as though etched into the skin by something long buried. The town healer called it an omen. The priest refused to look at it. Children whispered behind his back.
That's the hero's crest.
Does it glow?
Does that mean he's dangerous?
Link never answered. He didn't know what it meant either. And so he lived, not shunned, not celebrated, simply watched. Time moved on. He trained in secret, using a wooden blade crafted from storm-felled timber. He ran the outer trail each morning before sunrise, scaled cliff faces barefoot, and read every half-burned scroll he could find in the old Watchtower library. Not because anyone told him to, but because something inside him whispered that one day stillness would end. It did, but not in the way he expected. It was late summer when they came. House Carndon, one of the minor noble lines that served the Hylian crown, had been tightening its grip on the borderlands for years. Tax hikes, property claims, grain seizures. Norwyn, with its handful of goats and modest wheat plots, was given an impossible order. Deliver 3 full carts of tribute by the next quarter moon. They managed 2. They sent them. They prayed. No one thought they would come, certainly not with steel, but they did. 3 days later, just after dusk, 6 riders arrived. They wore cloaks, not uniforms. Their swords were stained, not polished. One bore a crest, half scratched away. They spoke little. One elder resisted. He was struck down with the hilt of a blade, then trampled. 2 boys were seized, lined up in front of the granary. The message was simple.
If a town disobeys once, it must not disobey again.
They set the grain on fire, then the livestock pens, then the orchard. They rode out laughing. No knights came. No sages appeared. No light fell from the sky. Link had watched the entire thing. He stood on the ridge above the orchard. His fists clenched. His teeth bled. He did not cry. He did not scream. He only remembered his mother's voice.
If you are ever afraid, follow the wind.
That night he walked north, past the withered fences, into the cliffs that bordered the wildwood. He knew what lay there. No one else bothered anymore. But he had seen it in dreams. The shrine of the south wind. It was not a shrine anymore. It was bones. A stone altar half swallowed by ivy. A broken arch collapsed into mud. A tree had grown where a statue once stood. He knelt before the altar, but no light came. The mark on his hand remained cold. No goddess spoke. He did not pray. He did not ask why. He simply waited. And when dawn came, the wind didn't return. He walked back to Norwin. The villagers were already rebuilding. Quietly. The boys had lived. The elder had not. No one spoke of revenge. No one expected justice. The name Carndon was never written down, but no one forgot. Link said nothing. But from that day forward, he carried the shrine's silence like a weight. He trained harder, walked farther. He did not expect power. He did not ask for purpose. He simply prepared. 5 years passed. One morning, a rider arrived from the east. He bore no crest. His horse bled from the knees. He handed the message scroll to the bellkeeper, whispered a single word, then collapsed. The scroll bore 3 lines. The crown has fallen. The flame has risen in Elos. The Triforce is broken. The village was quiet that night. The townsfolk gathered in the square. Some wept. Others asked if it meant war. But Link stood alone at the orchard's edge, where the youngest apples had just begun to turn. He opened a wooden chest at the foot of his bed. Inside, a folded green tunic, older than memory, a worn leather bracer, a steel sword, a single map, hand-drawn, marked with ruins long buried. He did not leave a letter. He did not say goodbye. At dawn, while the village slept, he walked west, into a world that had already moved on from prophecy. The shrine had not spoken, but it had shown him something long ago. If the gods would not protect this world, then someone would have to stand without them. Chapter 2. Wounds that do not bleed. Link did not speak for a week after the riders left Norwin. The villagers thought he was in shock, that he had taken the deaths harder than most. But Link had known something that the others didn't, something he had felt beneath the altar's broken stone and heard in the silence of the trees. The wind hadn't returned, not just that day, but in the days after. It no longer drifted through the eaves at night. It no longer curled around his boots when he walked the northern ridge. It was gone, not still, but absent, and in its place remained only a kind of aching, quiet pressure, the kind that filled a body when something had been taken, but left no visible scar. No one else noticed. But Link had always heard things others couldn't. He began rising earlier, training longer, building new trails in the cliffs beyond Norwin's farms, tracing ruins the village elders swore were just cave systems. He stopped wearing shoes except when forced. He stopped speaking unless spoken to. The villagers watched with a blend of admiration and distance. They respected his silence, but they feared it too.
The boy's just preparing for a path he thinks is his,
One whispered.
He's chasing shadows,
Said another.
He's waiting for the old stories to find him.
They weren't wrong, but they weren't right either. Link wasn't waiting for destiny. He was preparing in case it never came. It was during one of his daily runs beyond the northern gorge that he met the old priest. The man had no name, or perhaps he had forgotten it. He lived in a collapsed watchtower 2 valleys north, where moss grew thick and the sky disappeared behind towering firs. Link found him by accident, drawn by the flicker of candlelight where there should have been none. He expected resistance. Instead, the man simply asked.
Do you believe?
Link said nothing.
Good.
The priest nodded.
Neither do I.
His name, what remained of it, was Holland, once a servant of the Temple of Courage, now an exile by self-decree. He wore no robes, carried no staff. His shrine had no relics, only books. Torn, scorched, some unreadable. He showed Link one.
This is the hymn of balance. It says, the Triforce cannot choose wrong, that its vessels will always restore harmony.
He tossed it into the fire. Link watched it burn.
They sent me to teach that to children,
Holland said quietly.
even as they buried the ones who weren't born in the right bloodlines.
They met often after that. Holland spoke. Link listened. He learned about the cycle, the one the temples never spoke of plainly, how power, wisdom, and courage were not just virtues, but fixed roles passed between souls like titles. How the same war kept happening, century after century, with new masks, but the same end. How Zelda was never allowed to live an ordinary life. How Ganon was never born free of guilt. And how Link never got to choose anything at all. Link didn't cry or rage, but something inside him shifted. something that hurt more than any sword wound, the kind of wound that never bled because the cut went through the soul. That winter, the wind came once. Only once. It passed through Norwin like a thread pulled too tight. Link stood in the orchard and held out his hand. The mark on his palm glowed faintly, just for a second. Then it went dark again. And he knew. It hadn't been for him. It had been passing by. The next spring, rumors began to spread. A rebellion had started in the borderlands. In a place called Alos, nobles had been tried and executed in open courts. Relics had been shattered, shrines desecrated, and someone had sent out leaflets written in charcoal and ash. Balance is not justice. Chosen blood is still blood. The cycle is the cage. The villagers ignored them. Link didn't. He kept one, pressed it flat between the pages of an old journal given to him by Holland. And every time he opened that book, the page smelled like smoke. He did not yet know her name. He did not yet know what she had survived. But somewhere far from Norwin, another child of silence had walked into the fire. And unlike Link, she had not walked out alone. Chapter 3. The Girl by the River. They told the village 2 days in advance. A royal envoy would pass through Norwin on its way to the outer temples of Valora. The village was to clean its roads, prepare its fields for inspection, and present 2 elders for conversation. It would last an hour, perhaps 2. There was no need for alarm. No one expected her to come. The princess, Zelda. Link first saw her from the high trail overlooking the southern ridge. He was carrying a stack of firewood when he heard the horses, measured, careful steps, not rushed like soldiers or ragged like messengers. There were 7 riders in total. Most were dressed in travel armor, their crests bearing the symbol of the crown. At the center rode a girl in white and silver, her cloak pinned at the shoulder, her hair braided, not with jewels but with feathers. Zelda didn't look like paintings. She looked tired, not weak, not sick, just worn, like someone who'd been listening for too long without anyone to speak to. She spent most of the morning in the Elder Hall, speaking with those Link had long since stopped listening to. They spoke of tax yields, border stability, and shrine restoration schedules. She nodded politely, asked soft questions. Link watched from the orchard wall. She saw him. She didn't say anything. Not then. That evening, after the procession had ended and the village exhaled, Link returned to the stream behind the ridge to finish cleaning his hunting snares. The sun was setting. The air smelled of lilac and flint. He moved quietly, hands practiced, thoughts empty. Then he heard her voice. Software. Controlled. A question spoken aloud, not to him, but to the sky. Do you ever wonder if the world is just repeating itself? He turned. She was sitting by the edge of the water, her boots off, her fingers trailing the current. Her cloak rested beside her, folded with precision. She didn't look up. You're Link, aren't you? He nodded. They said you wouldn't talk. He didn't. She smiled faintly. That's all right. Most people who talk don't say much anyway. She tapped the water once, watching the ripples. They brought me here to observe the outskirts, to see how well the provinces are recovering after the last drought. I think they wanted me to be reassured, but I've never trusted what smiles show me. She looked at him then. Her eyes weren't royal. They were searching. Do you believe in the gods? He hesitated. Then slowly, quietly, he shook his head. She didn't flinch. I don't think I do either. Not the way they want me to. They sat in silence for a long time. The stream moved. The trees swayed. A bird called out once, but nothing answered. Zelda took a deep breath. They say I'll awaken soon, that my blood is ready, that the goddess will speak to me like she did to the others. I keep waiting for the voice, but all I hear is myself. Link looked at her. For a moment her mask cracked. The tiredness, the doubt, the loneliness beneath centuries of tradition. It was all there. What if it's all broken, she whispered. What if it stopped working a long time ago, and we're all just pretending it hasn't? She turned back to the water. Wouldn't it be easier if someone just said it? That the cycle is a lie, that it's time to stop waiting, time to choose. Link didn't move, but she looked at him again, and this time her voice dropped, lower, more honest. You don't want to be a hero, do you? He said nothing. Neither do I. The light faded. She stood. I'll be gone by morning. They'll write about the inspection and how promising everything looks. No one will mention you. No one will mention this. She stepped onto the trail, paused and added one last thing, half to herself. But I think I'll remember. Then she was gone. Link stayed by the water long after dark. He didn't light a fire. He didn't speak. The stream moved on, but her voice remained. Chapter 4. The Priest of Hollow Faith. The village of Norwin had a temple once. It sat at the eastern edge of town, just before the trail curved into the woods, where the trees grew so close together they filtered the sun into columns. It had no name, just a sloped roof, a cracked bell, and a pair of crumbling statues meant to represent the three virtues. But only two remained. Power had eroded long ago. Wisdom had lost its head. Courage was still standing, though moss had swallowed most of its legs. The priest remained too. His name was Father Winnen. He was not old in years, but in his posture, his eyes, and the way he carried the weight of liturgy like a rusted chain. His robes were threadbare, his sermons short. The children said he had once served in the castle court, long before the temples were rebalanced and faith was redirected to more politically convenient ends. Most days he swept the stone walkway or stared at the bell tower. But on the first day of the red moon, as was tradition, he lit the ceremonial fire. Link watched from the orchard fence. Winnen's hands shook. He dropped the first match. The second time it caught, but he did not kneel. He simply stared into the flame for a long time, lips unmoving, before turning away and walking into the temple without a word. Later that night, Link entered the temple, not out of piety, but curiosity, or perhaps something older, something like hope. He found Winnen at the altar, seated, no longer sweeping. The flame had gone out. His eyes were glassy. On the table before him lay a scroll, the old kind, written in the royal tongue. Beside it sat a small silver vial. Link stepped forward. Winnen looked up, unsurprised. "You're the one with the mark." Link nodded. "Don't worry, I won't report you. That symbol's caused more confusion than clarity in my lifetime." He gestured to the scroll. "This is a relic from the sanctuary of Kuris. It contains the hymn of origin, the one supposedly written when the first Zelda awakened her wisdom." Winnen tapped the parchment. "It's a beautiful lie." Link raised an eyebrow. Winnen chuckled, not warmly. "I used to believe in it. All of it. The divine pattern, the cycle, the sanctity of rebirth. That power would find its rightful bearer. That courage would rise when called. That wisdom would temper them both." He leaned forward, voice low. "But what happens when the world stops calling?" Silence. "I prayed for the voice, Link. I prayed every morning. I fasted, I recited the verses of dawn until I could speak them in my sleep. And you know what I heard? Nothing." Winnen held up the vial. "This is holy oil, meant for anointing the next vessel, the next Zelda. They sent it here for storage, in case a sign appeared in this province." He shook the vial once. "It's rancid." Link stepped closer to the altar. His eyes found the open scroll. The script was careful, ornate, but parts of it were smudged, corrected, some glyphs overwritten. Winnen followed his gaze. "They've changed the words over the years, cleaned them, removed the harder truths. You won't find anything about what happens when the chosen fall early, or when the Triforce shatters." He looked up, tired. "What happens when the hero dies before the sword is passed? When Zelda is struck before her light awakens? What then?" Link didn't answer, because he didn't know, and neither did Winnen. "I envy you in a way," the priest said. "You still search. You walk the woods. You ask questions even if you don't speak them. I stopped asking a long time ago. And now I'm afraid the silence isn't divine. It's just silence." He stood, straightened his robes. "The fire is out, Link. If you're looking for light, you may need to make your own." Link left the temple that night with nothing in his hands. But something had changed. He no longer thought of the gods as absent kings. He thought of them as ghosts, still echoing, still spoken of, but unable to intervene. And the people? They kept speaking the prayers, not because they believed, but because they didn't know how to stop. That night, Link wrote one sentence in his journal, the first in years. If there is no voice above, then the voice must begin below. Chapter 5. The Light That Flickered. The castle was quieter than usual. That was the first thing she noticed as she crossed the west veranda. The servants moved more slowly, as though aware of something unspoken. The guards stood straighter than they had the day before. And the air carried a tension she couldn't name. Princess Zelda stood alone at the edge of the balcony, looking down over the Hyrulean gardens. Below, the sacred pines stood in perfect rows, arranged centuries ago to mirror the lines of the Triforce itself. But one tree was gone, felled by lightning 2 seasons ago. No one had replaced it. No one had spoken of it since. Just like no one spoke of the latest rebellion report from Elos. She was 19. Her coronation had been postponed 3 times. Publicly, they claimed it was to allow for spiritual preparation. Privately, it was because she had not yet awakened. That was the word they used, awakened. As though it were something you could summon like rain. As though the goddess were a clockmaker, and Zelda just needed one more twist of fate to wind her soul into sanctity. She had waited. She had studied. She had fasted. She had prayed. But nothing had come. No vision. No dream. No whisper. Only stillness. The high sage had said it was because her heart was not open. The minister of virtue said it was because she questioned too much. Her father, King Alandar, had said nothing at all. She turned from the balcony and stepped back into her chamber. The walls were lined with tomes, not of war, but of ethics, cosmology, ancient history. Some texts she had copied by hand. Some had been confiscated from banned sects. One was even written by a dissident priest from Valora, anonymously decades ago. It had one phrase she read often. A goddess who does not answer is no better than a throne that does not listen. She hadn't quoted it aloud, but she had memorized it. On her desk sat a letter, opened, smudged. It bore the seal of a Southern Temple envoy. The words inside were short, clinical, hollow. A child bearing the Triforce of power was located in the borderlands of Eldara. Terminated before awakening. No divine flare detected. Risk level eliminated. Zelda reread the line 3 times. She did not cry. She did not scream. She simply folded the letter, placed it in the hearth, and lit a match. The paper curled, burned, became ash. She had asked once, months ago, what would happen if a bearer of power or wisdom died before their role awakened? The answer had been chilling. Then the cycle resets. Another child is born. The order persists. But what if no one came next? What if the cycle had simply run out? What if they were clinging to a structure that no longer chose anyone at all? Zelda stood by the fire until it dimmed. She walked to her mirror, looked at her own face. What did the people see? A princess, a vessel, a future queen, a prophecy in waiting. But what did she see? A girl with calloused hands from writing, eyes too tired for 19, and a heart that never wanted divinity, only truth. She had once thought Link might carry it with her. He hadn't said much, but he had listened. He was a stillness she could trust, but even he had retreated. Maybe they all had. She picked up her pen. In her private journal, the one no one read, she wrote, "If I awaken tomorrow, I will not be ready. If I awaken next year, I may not believe. And if I never awaken, then may history remember me for the questions I asked, not the ones I obeyed." The wind outside picked up, but it did not speak. Chapter 6. The Riders of House Karndon. The banners returned before the people did. It had been 4 years since Norwin last saw the colors of House Karndon. A faded orange crest stitched with iron thread, bearing the mark of a 2-headed hawk. But when the flags reappeared over the ridgelines, rippling in the dry wind, the villagers knew better than to welcome them. There were 5 riders. They arrived at dusk, their cloaks still dusty, their blades sheathed but visible. They wore no royal insignia, only the sigils of their house and the polished arrogance of men who believed the land still belonged to them. Link was in the woods when they arrived. He saw them from the tree line. low silhouettes against the last light of day. They moved with the confidence of officials, but the looseness of mercenaries. Not knights, not scouts. Something in between. He did not approach. He watched, and he waited. By the time he returned to the village, the riders had taken lodging in the elder hall and had summoned 3 families for census reconciliation. Link saw the signs immediately. The school bell had been taken down. The grain crates had been counted. Twice. The healer's ledger was missing. The villagers pretended not to worry. They straightened their clothes, cleaned the shrine steps, smiled too quickly. But Link had seen this pattern before. He remembered how it ended. That night he stood on the temple roof. From there he could see the lanterns lit inside the elder hall, the shadow of a man pacing, the lowered head of someone being lectured. And then, just before midnight, he saw something he had not expected, a parchment nailed to the temple door. He descended silently. By the time he reached it, most of the ink was already drying. It wasn't a decree, not a tax writ. It was a wanted notice, hand-sketched, rough but unmistakable. The face was of a young woman, hair pulled back, eyes sharp. Her name scrawled in charcoal beneath: Seraphine of Elos, rebel, heretic, executioner, bounty, 10,000 silver, accusation, treason, status, at large. Link stared at it for a long time. He did not move. He did not tear it down, but he memorized the face and the name. The next morning, the Carndon men conducted a census review in the town square. 2 men were fined for incomplete filings. 1 woman was ordered to present her son, age 6, for military registration. When she refused, 1 rider stepped forward. He drew his sword slowly, not to use it, but to remind everyone it was there. The boy cried. The woman shook. Link stood behind the well, half-shadowed. He gripped the leather wrap of his sword's hilt beneath his cloak, but he did not move, not yet. The moment passed. The men left, but the scar remained. That night someone defaced the wanted poster, a single line carved through the center of Seraphine's face. Below it, scrawled in charcoal, "We do not forget the fires." The next morning the riders were gone. No one knew who warned them. No one mentioned the defaced parchment. But by evening a child ran through the orchard fields, whispering the name over and over like a poem. Seraphine, Seraphine. Link returned to his home, lit a lantern, opened his journal, and wrote for the second time in his life, "Her name is spoken," not as fear, but as memory. Chapter 7. The Queen Who Never Was. The storm had not yet come, but the sky was already dark. Zelda stood at the edge of the western tower balcony, the crown resting not on her head, but in a velvet box on the table behind her. It had been measured, cleaned, prepared, but it had never been worn. Below her, the city prepared for festival. Lanterns lined the high streets. Flags bearing the sigil of the 3 fluttered weakly against a listless wind. Musicians rehearsed quietly on the far bridge, their melody cheerful, dutiful, and empty. Everything felt rehearsed. Everyone was waiting for something divine to happen. She wasn't, not anymore. Her hand rested against the cool marble railing, the mark on her right palm, the ancient glyph of wisdom, still faint, still incomplete. She had bled for it. She had prayed until her voice cracked, and yet the light never came. Her ancestors had spoken of visions, dreams, a chorus of clarity that shook the soul when the goddess made herself known. Zelda had waited years for that voice, and all she had received was silence. She turned as the Chancellor entered the room behind her. "The ceremony begins at twilight," he said without looking up. "Your presence is expected for the ritual reading." She didn't move. "What if I decline?" she asked flatly. He blinked, slowly. "Decline what, Your Grace?" "The title, the ceremony, the mask." The Chancellor frowned. "The people need stability." "So you'd have them bow to a lie?" He paused, his voice lowered. "They don't need the truth, Zelda. They need the idea that truth still exists." She didn't answer, and he didn't press her further. He left. She didn't watch him go. That night she stood in the center of the sanctum hall, alone. No attendants, no guards, no sages. Only her reflection, cast long across the obsidian floor by the lanterns lit in ritual readiness. She wore white, not because she wanted to, but because it was what they expected. Her journal sat on the altar behind her, open, unread. She picked up the quill, and she wrote her final entry. I was not a vessel. I was not a queen. I was a girl who saw the silence and believed something louder might come. If you find this, I ask only one thing. Do not follow me. Choose for yourself, even if it means breaking the world. She set the quill down, closed the journal, and placed it beneath the altar stone, where no one would look. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Far off but approaching, the bells rang, not in celebration, in warning. She turned once more to the mirror. No light shone in her eyes. No voice filled the chamber. Only wind, but it wasn't calling her. And when the doors opened, there was no scream, no spell, no resistance. Only the girl who never awakened, and the woman who refused to wait for permission. Chapter 8. The Ash in the Hourglass. The halls were quiet, quieter than she expected. Seraphine stood in the royal sanctum, boots echoing softly across the obsidian floor. The walls still smelled faintly of incense and old parchment. The torches flickered behind stained glass windows. The silence was thick, like air held between breaths. Zelda's body lay across the dais, unbloodied, unmarked. Seraphine hadn't needed to strike her. She hadn't come to slaughter. She had come to end the illusion. The sword on her back remained sheathed. Her breath was steady, her heart beat low, but her eyes stung, not from grief and not from regret, from memory. There had been no guards in the final corridor, no resistance. The sages had vanished. The archbishop had not answered his summons. Only Zelda had remained, waiting, dressed in white, standing in the center of the sanctum like a question that refused to be forgotten. She hadn't begged. She hadn't condemned. She'd looked at Seraphine and nodded, as if to say, I see it now. It hadn't made it easier, but it had made it real. Now Seraphine walked to the altar. Her fingers touched the edge of the marble slab, cool, unmoving. She looked down and saw it, the journal, half tucked beneath the stone, barely visible. She pulled it free, opened it, turned to the last page, and read the final line. Choose for yourself, even if it means breaking the world. She closed her eyes. Zelda hadn't been her enemy. She had been a prisoner, just like Seraphine had been. Only, Seraphine had found the door and walked through it. She stood there a long time, listening to nothing. No thunder, no divine voice, no sudden shattering of glass or holy retaliation. Only wind and footsteps approaching behind her. She turned. A boy no older than 17, a scribe maybe, stood at the entrance, pale, trembling, unarmed. She looked at him. He looked at her. He expected death. She gave him something worse. Tell them I didn't take the crown. Her voice was quiet, controlled. Tell them she gave it to silence. Then she walked past him. In the square outside the castle, fires burned in measured lines. Shrine documents, royal census books, ledgers of bloodlines and tithes, sacred contracts written in tongues no one had spoken in generations. Seraphine watched them burn. Not with anger, not with triumph, but with purpose. Every system required a funeral. She stepped into the courtyard. One of her generals approached, armor scorched, face lined with ash and sweat. The gates are sealed. The council has fled. There are still factions, loyalists, remnants. Seraphine nodded. Let them scatter. The throne is not the victory. The general paused. And the people? Seraphine looked to the far wall of the inner city, where murals once depicted the unbroken Triforce and the three eternal figures beneath it. She saw it differently now. Not eternal, just repeating. The people are waiting for a world they've never been offered. Let's give it to them. She turned from the flames and walked toward the broken gate. Behind her, the old world groaned and cracked. Before her, there was only the future. And the boy with the mark on his hand, who hadn't yet realized that he was the last thread left unburned. Chapter 9. The Smoke That Stays. The forest had thinned by the time Link reached the province of Cernan. Pines gave way to red clay and sun-dried flats. The sky stretched wider. The birdsong changed. The wind smelled of dust and hot stone, but beneath it was something older. Ash. Not fresh, not choking, but settled. The kind that had time to cool. He followed a road that no longer existed on his map. What had once been a military path now bent around the ruins of outposts. What had once been toll stations were now splintered timber and abandoned flags. He passed 3 carts headed in the opposite direction. One was drawn by an ox, the others by silent men and women. No one asked who he was. No one called him by name. He wasn't recognized anymore, and he wasn't sure if that felt like failure or freedom. The village of Risen sat low in a sun-baked canyon. Its walls were half rebuilt from stone pulled down from a fallen watchtower. Its people moved with purpose, not hurried, not fearful, but alert. Link stood at the ridge above it, watching, and saw something that made him stop walking. A mural painted in ochre and charcoal covered the side of the well house. It was a flame, not wild, not chaotic, controlled, spiraling, rising. Beneath it, a name, written in careful script. Seraphine. He descended slowly. No one drew a weapon. No one bowed. A child offered him water. A merchant asked if he had any salt to trade. And then an elder woman, wrinkled, sun-darkened, eyes sharper than steel, approached him without fear. "You're not from here," he nodded. "You're not one of hers either." He paused. "Not yet." She studied him, then pointed to a low stone bench near the market shade. "Sit, drink, listen. You'll understand more by dusk than 1,000 temple scrolls ever told you." He did. He listened to the man who described how Seraphine's soldiers burned the land ledgers, freeing families bound to soil they didn't own. To the midwife who said Seraphine sent healers, not taxmen, to the drought provinces. To the boy who said he no longer feared temple enforcers because the flame general said no child owes blood for prophecy. Link sat in silence, and the longer he listened, the more something inside him began to shift. Not in agreement, but in uncertainty. That night he camped beneath the stars outside the village walls. The flames of the central fire still flickered in the canyon below. He could still see the mural, still read her name. And when the wind shifted, he caught the scent again. Not smoke, not soot, but the kind of ash that never fully leaves, the kind that stays with you, even after the fire ends. He opened his journal, and beneath his last line, "Her name is spoken," he wrote, not as fear, not as fury, but as thanks. Chapter 10. The Weight of Fire. Seraphine sat alone in the ruins of the Temple of Binding. Its walls were gone, its altars shattered. The golden columns once etched with blessings of the three now lay scattered across the northern escarpment like bones after a storm. She had ordered its destruction personally, not out of vengeance, out of necessity. A shrine that teaches obedience is not a place of worship, it is a chain. The sun was low. Shadows reached like fingers over the broken sanctuary floor. Behind her, the campfire of her traveling retinue crackled. Beyond it, murmurs rose. A debate, quiet but tense. She knew the shape of it before she heard the words. Discontent, doubt, fracture. General Rena approached, grim-faced, loyal, bloodstained from the border purge. The emissaries from Valora left. They won't recognize the dissolution of crown law. Seraphine didn't respond. They say you're becoming what we destroyed. Still, she said nothing. And some of the Flameborn, they want you to take the throne. That made her look up. Then they've forgotten why I lit the first fire. She rose, brushing ash from her cloak. Tell them the throne is not the answer. It never was. We're not building a new kingdom. We're unlearning the need for one. Rena hesitated. And if the people still want one? Seraphine turned, gaze hard. Then they are not free yet. That night she walked the temple grounds alone. Each broken pillar marked a former vow. Each crushed mural a god she no longer feared. But as she passed the altar, the one where generations of kings had sworn to protect the order of balance, She slowed. A child had placed something there recently. A toy sword, carved from driftwood, balanced perfectly on the cracked stone. She picked it up. It was light, too light. But even weightless, her hands trembled, because it had been left in hope, not as a weapon, as a wish. She sat, and for the first time in weeks, she opened her journal, not to command, not to plan, but to remember. She wrote, "What do I do if I win? What do I offer in place of myth when the silence I carve becomes unbearable? The boy with the mark still walks. He has not drawn his sword. I fear he may be the only one who can end this without remaking the chain." She closed the book, and for a moment, just a moment, she let the silence sit beside her, not as an enemy, but as a question. Chapter 11. The Village with No Gods. The road to Farron Hollow was cracked and overgrown, its path marked only by half-sunken milestones and broken banners tangled in thorn. Link followed it in silence. The wind here didn't speak. It whistled through husks of once verdant fields. There were no shrine bells, no sacred oaks, no songs, only fences. Not protective, but defensive. Farron Hollow had no center square. Its buildings leaned inward like survivors of a long siege. The people moved like ghosts, present but reluctant to be seen. There were no murals, no flags, no fire in the windows. The well was sealed with stone. As Link entered, no one greeted him. A child ran, a door shut. A man watched from behind stacked crates, eyes narrow. Only one person approached, a woman in a sun-worn cloak, her hands stained with clay and soot. "You're not one of hers," she said plainly. Link said nothing. "And you're not from the crown either." He nodded once. "Then you'll get no welcome, but no blade." She motioned for him to follow. "If you're seeking a story, you won't find it here. We don't speak names anymore." He followed her to the remains of a shrine. Its walls had collapsed. The icon had been removed, not defaced, not burned, just gone. "They came through last spring," she said. "Her flameborn." Link didn't need to ask who her was. "They burned the census records, tore down the altar, said we were free now." She stared into the dry basin where the temple basin used to overflow. "Free to what?" Link tilted his head. "We weren't chosen by the old world, but at least we knew what we weren't." She looked at him. "Now there's nothing left to pray to, and nothing rising in its place." Later, Link sat by the town's edge. The sun had not broken the clouds all day. An old man joined him, said nothing for a long time. Then, almost as if exhaling a secret, "When you pull down a god, you have to plant something deeper. Otherwise, the people just float." Link didn't respond. The man looked at his left hand, at the faint fractured triangle still etched in the skin. "You carry that like it still means something." Link looked down, and for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure if it did. He left Farron Hollow the next morning. No one stopped him, no one followed, no one asked his name. The wind remained silent, and the well stayed sealed. Chapter 12. The name she buried. The letter came in a folded scrap of leather, carried by a child with ash in her hair and a missing shoe. She said nothing, just handed it over and ran. Seraphine didn't open it for hours. She knew the shape of old handwriting, and this one cut through years she thought she'd already burned. When the camp settled, when the flames dimmed, and her commanders finally ceased their endless questions, she lit a lantern alone and read the single line inside. "Your real name was Sarah," and beneath it, "I remember." She stared at the words for a long time. Then she mounted her horse and rode west. The settlement was small, a scatter of stone homes rebuilt over broken ones. The people there had no banners. They didn't call themselves loyalists or rebels. They grew food, traded quietly, hid from history. He was waiting at the fire ring, older, slower, but unmistakable. His name was Taman. She hadn't spoken it in 17 years. He didn't rise when she arrived. He simply looked at her. "You got taller," he said. She didn't smile. "You didn't burn." He nodded. "Not fast enough." They sat in silence for a long while. Finally, he said, "I thought you were dead." I was. No, you just forgot who you were. She looked at the fire. I had to. Maybe, but you didn't have to forget me. They had grown up together. Elos had been their cradle, the mine trails, the apple grove, the broken shrine. He had taught her how to set snares. She had taught him how to lie to tax riders. When the soldiers came, he was the one who pulled her from the flames. When she ran into the mine afterward and didn't return, he waited. Weeks, months. Then buried her name when he couldn't wait anymore. Now she was here, and she didn't know what to say. Do you hate me? She asked. No, he poked at the fire. But I don't know if I'd follow you. Then you should leave. Why? Because I don't want to kill someone who remembers who I was. He looked at her, long and deep. Then maybe you shouldn't be leading. She didn't answer. He stood slowly. I just wanted you to remember that before the world broke you, you were good. Not righteous, not chosen, just good. He paused at the trail. Don't forget her, Seraphine, because I promise you, none of us can replace her. He walked away. She didn't call after him. That night she opened her journal again, and beneath her last entry she wrote, I burned my name to be heard, but in doing so, I may have lost the only voice that was ever truly mine. She sat beside the fire until it turned cold, and for the first time in a long time, she said it aloud, Sarah, and it hurt. Chapter 13. The Circle and the Stone. The road to Caerwyn was unmarked. Link found it by accident, after days of walking west, following dry riverbeds and the shifting trail signs of old caravans. The wind carried scents of baked clay and lavender, and the hills grew round and golden, dotted with stone ruins worn smooth by time. When he crested the final ridge, he saw it, a town with no walls, no flags, no guards, just a circle of homes built around a single, massive stone. At its center, people sat, talking, listening, writing, not chanting, not preaching, deliberating. Caerwyn had no leader. That was the first thing they told him. The second was that he was welcome, but only if he understood that titles held no power here. Not hero, not flameborn, not royal. He was given a room, a meal, a place by the central fire. That night a woman approached him. Her name was Leora, a historian once attached to the Temple of Courage before its archives were burned. She now led one of the reckoning circles, gatherings where people shared what had happened to them in the years since the cycle fell. She asked if he would speak. He didn't, but he listened. An old man from the Vyloran coast stood and told the story of how Zelda once saved his family from conscription, personally, quietly, without ceremony. A woman from Eldara described Seraphine's soldiers freeing her village, but also leaving them without healers or food. A boy spoke of seeing the Triforce glow in his sister's hand, only for her to die in a shrine collapse before anyone could record her name. And then someone asked, what if none of them were wrong? The circle went still. What if they were all just caught in a story too old to be questioned? Link stared at the fire. His thoughts wandered. To Zelda's eyes, tired but kind. To Seraphine's face on the wanted posters. To the sound of the shrine collapsing in his youth. To the mark on his hand, flickering, faint, still there. He felt no anger, only gravity. Leora approached him after. They're trying, she said, to live without legends, to build something that doesn't require a chosen one, or a throne, or a sword. He looked at her. She held his gaze. But we don't hate those who came before. We just want to be allowed to choose something new. That night he stood by the stone at the village center. It was smooth, uncarved, heavy, ancient, not holy, just enduring. He touched it. It didn't glow, but it was warm. And for the first time since Zelda died, since Seraphine's name reached his ears, since the Triforce failed to answer, he felt something close to peace. He opened his journal, and beneath his last entry, he wrote, there are those who do not want gods, only enough quiet to speak their own name aloud. He closed the book and stayed another night. Chapter 14. The Flame That Splinters. They met in a ruin called Halden's Hold, Once a northern garrison post, now a makeshift command citadel where Seraphine's inner circle gathered every 3 moons to align the direction of the flame. But alignment was no longer the goal. Now they came to divide it. Seraphine stood at the head of the stone table, where a carved map of the region had been restored with charcoal lines and color-coded banners. Each territory marked, claimed, neutral, resisting. She ignored it. Instead, her eyes scanned the faces before her. Rena, her oldest general, sharp, loyal, but tired of gradualism. Kale, a former monk-turned-tactician, quiet, severe, increasingly absolutist. Mira of Elos, one of the only survivors of their shared childhood, now leader of the logistics front. She hadn't smiled in months. And Derek Voust, the newest voice. Loud, commanding, dangerous. He spoke first. We've pacified 6 outposts. The temple of first wisdom is fallen. The royal loyalists in Valora are either scattered or hiding. He leaned forward. But peace is stagnation. The people are ready for a central structure. We need a declaration, a charter, a throne. Seraphine's jaw tightened. We didn't burn the old world to build a new cage. You didn't, Derek replied, but they will if we don't. Silence. Then Rena spoke. We're holding power now, Sarah, whether we wanted to or not. If you don't define what the flame is, someone else will. Then I'll extinguish it, Seraphine said coldly. You can't, Mira whispered. It's no longer yours alone. Seraphine looked to the map, the red banners, the black ones, the gray, every inch marked, controlled, administered. They had won the revolution, but the question now was whether they would govern it or abandon it. She stepped back. I lit the flame to unseat the cycle, not to sit on its ashes. Derek stood. And what if you're wrong? What if people need structure, need a name to obey? Then we failed. Later that night, Seraphine walked the upper ramparts of Halden's Hold. The wind was sharp. The stars were faint. She thought of Taman's face, the name he'd called her, Sarah. No one here used it, not even Mira anymore. She was the flame bearer, the reformer, the unbound queen. She was becoming a myth, and myths only ended in 2 ways, worship or destruction. She opened her journal. Her hand trembled. She wrote, This was never supposed to be a crown, but if I do not destroy the idea of rulership, it will find me again. It will wear my face, and it will undo everything. She closed the book, and for the first time, she didn't know what to do next. Chapter 15, The Hidden Garden. He found it by accident. The path wasn't marked on his map. It was barely a trail, just a narrow track through elderwood, shielded by stone outcroppings and wild yarrow. Birds circled above, but never landed. The air was unusually still, but something about it felt known, familiar, as though someone had walked it before him. After a day of travel, the trail ended. What lay ahead was no village, no ruins, just a walled grove nestled into a natural hollow. Its gates made of carved willow, its archway unmarked, unguarded. The air changed when he crossed it, not in temperature, in weight. It felt lighter, as if the wind here remembered gentler names. Inside, a dozen people tended the soil. They did not flinch when they saw him. They didn't bow or reach for weapons. They simply nodded and continued. One, an older woman with ink-stained sleeves, rose from a bench beside a small fountain and approached him. You came, she said softly. He tilted his head. She said someone like you would. He stared. The woman smiled faintly. Not in prophecy, in hope. Her name was Nida, once a scholar in the Royal Archives. Banished after defending the dissemination of unsanctioned philosophical scrolls, Zelda's scrolls. Zelda had written them during the last year of her life. Private journals, fragmented thoughts, doubts, pleas. Nida had salvaged them after the fall, and here in this hidden grove, she and a quiet few had chosen to preserve her voice, not as command, not as doctrine, but as a living memory. She led Link through the grove. There were no icons, no stained glass, no carvings of the Triforce. Instead, there were stones inscribed with questions. What do we do when faith dies before we do? Who decides who is chosen? What is courage, if not consent? Link walked among them in silence. Nida handed him a small leather-bound book, Zelda's. Her handprint was still faint on the cover. He opened it and read, "If I fall before I awaken, may my death not become another symbol. Let it become a pause, so that someone else may choose the next line." That night, Link sat by the garden's edge. He did not speak, but something in him settled. He opened his journal and wrote, "Her voice survived, not in fire, not in stone, but in the quiet, and I must decide if I will answer." He closed it and watched the wind move through the leaves. Chapter 16, The One She Didn't Burn. She left before dawn, no trumpet, no decree, no trail of flame born to follow her into the hills. She left the campaign map on the table. She left her command seal in the ashes of the hearth. She took only her sword, her journal, and one name, Link. She had spared him once, not from mercy, from doubt. He was the one tether she hadn't cut, the one bearer the gods had marked, yet never used. He had walked through the silence without cursing it. He had vanished into the wilds not to lead, not to fight, but to endure. And that disturbed her, because she had not endured. She had ignited. She traveled alone, through lands she had liberated, some blooming, some crumbling. In some towns her name was still sung. In others it was whispered in fear. But in each place when she asked, "Have you seen the one with the mark?" they nodded eventually and pointed further west. In the village of Estrin Hollow, a child gave her a drawing, charcoal on canvas bark, a figure with a sword on his back, sitting beside a tree. No face, no title, just stillness. "He didn't say much," the child said, "but he fixed our roof." In the market town of Braeland's Pass, a trader told her, he didn't carry a banner, didn't preach, but when the well dried up, he found the river that fed it, quietly then left. In every place she found echoes, not of heroism, but of presence. A man who moved not to change the world, but to leave it standing. She reached the hills of Carowin near dusk. The wind was dry, the grass tall. She crested a ridge and saw him, sitting alone, by a stone, unarmed, waiting, as though he had known she was coming. He didn't rise. She didn't draw. For a long moment neither spoke. Then she stepped forward and sat, not across from him, beside him. She didn't ask if he hated her. She didn't ask if he forgave her. She asked only one thing.
Did the silence ever feel holy to you?
He looked at her, then slowly, almost imperceptibly. He shook his head. She nodded, looked away, and whispered,
Me neither.
Chapter 17, The Conversation Without Swords. They sat beside the stone for a long time before anyone spoke. The wind stirred the grass gently. A hawk circled far overhead. The light had begun to shift, cooling into dusk. Still, neither of them reached for a weapon. Seraphine broke the silence first.
They think I want a crown,
Link didn't respond.
but I don't. I burned the last one, and the robe it sat on.
Still, he said nothing. She looked at him, tried again.
Do you know what it feels like to tear down a mountain and realize the valley doesn't want to be rebuilt?
He turned his head, just slightly. She took that as permission to continue. I thought if I ended the legend, people would be free. No more chosen bloodlines. No more temples demanding loyalty. No more being born into obedience. Her voice was steady.
But freedom isn't the same as meaning. And now they're asking me to give them new names, new gods, a cycle in different paint.
Link looked at the Triforce on his hand. Faded, fractured. He finally spoke. Quiet, dry.
What did you think would happen after the fire?
Seraphine closed her eyes.
I thought, if I took the weight of the old story, someone else would write a better one.
A pause, then she asked.
Why haven't you stopped me?
He looked at her, then at the stone between them, then said,
Because I don't know if you're wrong.
That shook her. She almost laughed, but it came out more like breath.
Then why are you here?
Because I don't know if you're right either.
Another silence followed, then slowly,
Zelda trusted the system too long.
she said.
I didn't trust it at all. You keep walking through its ruins as if they might still say something.
He looked out over the hill toward the horizon.
Not the ruins, the people in them.
Seraphine lowered her voice.
They'll ask you to choose soon. You know that, don't you?
Link nodded.
Restore, reform, or end it.
She studied him.
And which will you choose?
He didn't answer. She didn't press. Instead, she leaned back, looked at the sky.
I used to pray to the wind when I was a child. When the soldiers came, when the shrine didn't open, I thought if I was quiet enough, it would speak back.
Link's gaze softened. He said simply,
It never did.
No,
she agreed.
but you listened anyway.
The sun dipped lower. Neither of them moved. For the first time since the cycle shattered, there was no sword between them, no prophecy, no throne, only two children of silence, finally hearing each other. Chapter 18. When the flame is leaderless. The halls of Halden's hold were colder without her. Rena stood alone at the strategy table, staring at the map that no longer moved. The banners marking liberated regions hadn't changed in days. Neither had the reports. Seraphine was gone. No letter, no command chain, no bodyguard. Just gone. Some said she was scouting. Others whispered she'd been captured. Derek Voust, loudest of the inner circle, had a different theory.
She's abandoned the flame.
Rena didn't believe it, but she feared what belief even meant anymore. The Flameborn Council convened without her. The stone chamber was filled with too many voices and not enough clarity. Derek stood at the head.
If the flame bearer is not here to lead,
He declared.
then the flame must act without her.
Rena stood. The flame is not a throne to be inherited.
Then what is it?
Derek fired back.
A ghost? A prayer without a shrine?
The room murmured. Officers exchanged glances.
She gave us power.
Derek continued.
But power unused is just rust. We need law, command, expansion.
She lit a fire,
Rena said.
not a kingdom.
Derek smiled. Then perhaps you'd rather we let it burn uncontrolled.
The vote was tabled, but the damage was done. Mira refused to speak afterward. Kale left the chamber before the bell rang. That night, Rena stood at the ramparts, watching the torches flicker in the valley below. The soldiers were still loyal, for now. But loyalty without direction turned quickly into hunger, and hunger became a weapon. She returned to her chamber, opened the letter Seraphine had once left for her months ago, unmarked, unread until now. She unfolded the parchment. It read,
If I do not return, do not look for me. This was never meant to become mine.
beneath it, one more line.
Watch the wind. It always carries the truth before the fire catches.
Rena folded the letter again and wept. Chapter 19. The Last Conversation. Dawn came quietly. No thunder, no birdsong. Only the faint gold shimmer of light tracing the ridgeline, casting long shadows over the hills. Link had not moved from his place beside the stone. Neither had Seraphine. They had spoken little after nightfall. Words they both understood were sacred when chosen slowly. She stood first. No ceremony, no hesitation, just a final breath held in her chest, like a page being turned.
I'm leaving.
She said. Link nodded once.
Back to your army.
He asked.
To what's left of it.
She didn't say my people. She didn't say my revolution. Something in her voice had shifted.
They want a queen,
She said.
and I burned the last one.
Link rose slowly, brushed dust from his cloak.
What will you do?
She looked at him. Try to remember the girl I was before the fire. Try to kill the part of me that wants to be remembered.
He considered her.
That part will never die.
She didn't deny it. Instead, she reached into her satchel, pulled out a journal, worn, ash-scarred, bound in leather.
This is mine.
She said.
Before the campaign, before the temple fell, before I picked up the blade.
She offered it. Link took it.
Burn it,
She said.
or read it, but don't carry it.
He studied her.
Why give it to me?
She hesitated. Then, quietly, because I know you'll still walk forward after it. You're the only one who doesn't carry fire or crown. Just the silence.
He looked at the book in his hands, then at her.
Will I see you again?
She smiled, sad, honest. If we do, I hope it's in a place that doesn't need either of us.
She turned, walked down the ridge trail, never looked back. Link stood there long after she disappeared. He did not open the journal. Not yet. He simply looked out across the valley, where ruins glimmered like bones beneath the rising sun. And for the first time in his journey, he didn't feel alone. Chapter 20. The Three Roads. The wind had returned, not strong, not warm, but present. It moved through the grass like a memory. It stirred the cloak around Link's shoulders. It carried scents from the east, dust, smoke, rain, and something deeper, something waiting. He stood at the crossroads beyond Caerwyn. 3 paths branched before him, not marked by signs but by presence. He could feel them, not in his body but in the space just beyond language, like echoes of choices that had not yet been made. He closed his eyes and listened. The north road was stone, sharp, rigid, reclaimed. It led toward the high walls of the reclaimed capital, where surviving Flameborn and disbanded Royal Guard were gathering under a new banner. They spoke of peace, of compromise, of restoring order through structured hierarchy. Link felt the cold steel of law in that path, and the weight of repetition. The eastern road was flame, flickering, fragmented. It led through the scattered revolutionary provinces, where leaders once loyal to Seraphine now debated what to do without her. Some wanted a council, some wanted expansion, some wanted revenge. They called it the Reformation. Link felt the fire of possibility there, and the danger of zeal. The southern road was shadow, unmarked, untamed. It led into the forgotten places, the shrines swallowed by moss, the temples left to collapse, the people who wanted nothing more than silence. It was the only road with no claim, no name, no promise of power, only an ending. Link felt nothing there but quiet and truth. He opened his eyes. The Triforce on his hand pulsed, not bright, but alive, for the first time in years. He reached into his satchel, pulled out Zelda's journal, then Seraphine's dot, one in each hand. He did not open them, not yet. He looked down each road, and the silence asked, "Which future will you carry?" He didn't answer, not with words. He stepped forward. Chapter 21. The Fourth Path. The roads were behind him. Link walked south, but it wasn't the shadowed path. It wasn't any of the three. It was one he made himself, each step forging new soil, new story, untouched by banners or prophecy. The Triforce glowed faintly on his hand, not as command, but as recognition. He returned to the hidden garden, to Nida, to the quiet thinkers, to the stones etched with questions. He brought both journals, one written in doubt, one written in fire, and he laid them on the central table, not as relics but as lessons. For weeks he spoke, not often, but when he did, the people listened. He told them what Zelda wrote when no one was looking. He told them what Seraphine burned to remember who she was. He did not ask them to choose sides. He asked them to choose awareness, and slowly the whispers changed. Not which path, but what now? Word spread, quietly. Caerwyn welcomed refugees from both Flameborn and Crown Loyalist lands. No symbols, no titles, only questions. And in those questions, a new answer began to grow. Then one day, the wind shifted again, this time not hollow, not cold, but inviting. Link followed it, to the old temple of reflection, shattered during the rebellion, long abandoned. He entered. Inside, nothing remained but cracked glass and dust. But at the altar, a light pulsed faintly. He stepped forward, and the Triforce appeared, not floating, not demanding, just present, all three pieces: wisdom, power, courage. He stood before it, and it spoke, not in language, in memory. He saw Zelda beneath the balcony. He saw Seraphine before the fire. He saw himself standing alone by the windless shrine. Then, a question.
Will you restore the cycle?
He closed his eyes, then,
No,
Will you end it?
no.
Will you remake it?
he opened his eyes and whispered.
I will leave it behind.
The Triforce shimmered, then scattered, not destroyed, not shattered, released. Its pieces flew into the sky, into the trees, into the hearts of those yet to come, not to be chosen, to be carried by all. When Link stepped from the ruins, the world felt no different. The birds still called, the earth still moved, the people still argued and planted and dreamed. But something was gone, and something had begun. He returned to the garden. No one asked what he did. No one asked what he saw. They only asked what came next. He smiled and answered.
We build.
Epilogue: The Stone and the Wind. Years passed, not marked by coronations or temples, but by the slow rhythm of people choosing what to keep and what to let go. The Flameborn disbanded. The remnants of the crown dissolved. No banner replaced them. In the quiet hills above Caerwyn, a tree grew where the old road forked. Its roots split the earth softly, growing through what remained of the northern stone. Its branches reached across the sky, as if in quiet conversation with the wind. Beneath it lay two things: a sheathed sword, never again drawn, a journal wrapped in oilskin, open to a page that simply read, "Not all silence is surrender, not all fire is destruction, and not all who walk without title are lost." The tree bore no name, but those who found it called it the place where the legend ended and something else began. Postscript: a new legend spoken in the lowlands. There is an old story they tell in the lowlands now. It isn't found in temples. It isn't sanctioned. It doesn't begin with a princess or end with a beast. It begins with a wind that didn't speak, and three people who listened to it differently. One waited for it to guide her, one cursed it for its silence, and one chose to walk forward anyway. The story doesn't name them. It only says this: when the gods stopped answering, the people began asking better questions. And that's how it ends, not with a sword and stone, not with a hero on a throne, but with a quiet place where someone once chose not to be chosen. The end. The Legend of Zelda: A Broken Link.